No, I'm not showing my face. I just want to say this here. Republicans out there are saying grades K through 12 are teaching critical race theory. Really? They're teaching critical race theory. How do they consider it teaching critical race theory when all you're doing is teaching the factual history of black people and Native American people and Asian people in this country? What they went through in this country to this day. Factual history. Not revised history that the white people want taught, where they minus out things like slavery and racial, oppression and all the other stuff these white people have done to these other races. It's not critical race theory to teach the history of somebody, but I do get how racist, bigoted white people would get that it is. Because they've been revising history since the beginning of time. I mean, take a look at whites in the Catholic Church alone. I mean, come on. They turned Jesus white. When in fact, Jesus was never white. He was never Christian. He belonged to the Islamic faith. And he was a Jewish man. But they turned him white and made him, oh, he's Christian. I think the white man has a problem with factual history. And now that black people and Asian people and Native American people for centuries have put up with white man's revised history and now want the facts to be told, the white man is crumbling. Oh, it's going to make our children feel bad. Did you ever think about how your white man history made black and Native American and Asian people in this country feel? You didn't see them crumbling and crying and making up that false theories of critical race theory and being taught in schools or any of that stuff. No, you didn't. Nope. We weren't doing that. We just taught our history between our people. Called it good. Because we knew our history would get out there to our people. But we wanted our history to get out there even more. Because our cultures were being killed by the white man's revised history. Our heritage was dying under the white man's revised history. We didn't ask you to paint our history pretty. We asked you to teach it, no matter how it went. If you want to teach about the African people who sold their own people in slavery, fine, teach it. But also teach how white men also went and invaded African tribes and stole people from those tribes. You want to teach about Native American slavery where if their tribe got attacked and say, I'm a warrior and my wife, or a hunter and my wife gets killed in that attack, therefore making it so my children and myself do not have a caregiver, that I have the right to go and attack that assaulting tribe and kidnap one of their women to become my wife, to replace the woman that tribe killed, to make her a slave until she accepts the fact that she has a new role in my tribe as my wife, to care for my children, and to learn the rules of my tribe so that she can become a full, free member of my tribe, but yet ignore the fact that white man came to this land and taught Native Americans how to profit off of slavery, and then they were keeping their own people or other tribes' people and black people as slaves themselves. Some tribes were. Oh, it's fine to teach about the Native Americans who had slaves, even though they freed their slaves, gave them the chance for freedom. But Lord's sake, don't teach about the white man's in slavery of different races without the possibility of being freed at all. And for heaven's sakes, don't talk about indentured servants who were basically slaves, who were white, who had the right to gain their own freedom. Oh, for heaven's sakes, don't do that. That would hurt some white person's feelings. And it would be considered critical race theory. So, I put it to you this way. If teaching that history is critical race theory, then I say teaching the history of our nation's emancipation from Britain may make some British people feel bad. So it's critical race theory. Teaching about the Holocaust and how Jewish people were systematically imprisoned and enslaved and murdered, much like the Native Americans here. If that, isn't going to make some German person or descendant feel bad, especially descendants who came from the Nazi Germany, if that's not going to make them feel bad, then nothing will. Of course, the German people embraced that history, but, American Germans just might feel bad about it. So let's not teach that. We already know the South feels bad about the factual history of the Civil War, so we shouldn't teach that at all. Oh my God, we're going to offend some Southern people for what their ancestors did. Really? You know what offends me? These people want to revise the history instead of learn from it. It offends me, and you know why? Because it proves to me they never learned from history. They just continue their lies and their bigotry. Oh, in your face, they may say, oh, we're not a bigot and act all proper like. But in the plain and simple of wanting to hide the history of African Americans, Native Americans, and Asian Americans in this country, on how they came to be in this country from the very start, and how they've had to struggle in this country from the very start, and how they built most of this country from the very start. If that's critical race theory, then teaching any of the white man's history is also critical race theory. You cannot say that teaching factual history is critical race theory and replace that factual history with revised false facts, or false information, should I say, because there's no such thing as false facts. A fact is a fact. You want to replace history with false narratives to paint white man in a pleasurable light, instead of showing what white man had done in the past and working to never do that again and do better in the future. That is bigoted and racist and just as bad as what your white ancestors did to the Native Americans, the blacks, and the Asians in this country in the first place. Because in a large way, you are dismissing the heritage, the culture, and the struggle of whole races of people simply because your ancestors' actions are going to make you feel bad. You know what? Your actions are making my Native American and African American side of me feel bad. So I guess your actions are part of critical race theory, isn't it? Because according to your logic, any factual history that makes your white child feel bad is critical race theory. Okay. Your revised history makes my Native American and African American side feel bad. I feel dismissed. I feel ignored. I feel inconsequential in history. I feel like all of the struggles my ancestors went through do not matter. So that must, to white people that is, so that must mean that your revised history is critical race theory. And that's by your own standards. If the factual history of black people, the slavery they went through, the struggle they went through for their freedom is critical race theory, if the factual history of Native American people, of their lands being taken from them, of them being relegated to reservations, of them being systematically murdered with disease blankets, and the very first history of drive-bys by covered wagons who would go to tribes and drive around in their villages and shoot the people and bash the babies' heads in on stones. If that makes Native American people feel bad, then it is critical race theory. If the fact that you omitted that from history makes me feel bad, then it is critical race theory. And you can't teach white man's history on this continent without including black Native American and Asian history and Latino history on this continent without making a black, Native American, Latino, or Asian person feel bad because you wish to omit their history to make your white people feel better. That's critical race theory, according to your standards. When in true fact, critical race theory is a graduate course in law school to teach graduate legal students how to recognize biases and try to possibly avoid them. You know, the biases that do things like get a man shot in the back of the head because he's black, get a child shot in seconds because he's playing with a toy gun at a park, but a white kid ain't no problem. The same freaking week, a black child was shot in seconds at a park for playing with a toy gun. A white kid in his backyard, when the officers went through his yard, playing with a toy gun, was talked down. Or talked to. And it was found the gun was a toy. And I remember this because it pissed me off so fucking bad it wasn't even funny. They didn't even bother to talk to the child in the park who was black with the toy gun. No, they didn't even bother with that. They took seconds to step out of their car and gun that poor child down and kill him over that toy gun. But that white kid with the same kind of toy gun in his backyard that they run into, oh yeah. They most certainly can't shoot that child. He's white! I'm sure we can reason with him. Because a white boy would never shoot us, would I? Would a white boy ever shoot anybody? Yet, the proof is in the pudding when you take a look at the insurrection on the White House on January 6th. I guess white boys will most definitely harm and murder officers in a heartbeat for no justifiable reason. Just on the say-so of a lie from another white man. Now, if Trump was black and espousing the crap he is espousing, if Trump was Obama and saying what Trump is saying, you guys would be up in arms. Oh my God. You would be hollering and screaming and saying how you want that black man out of office. But a white man does it. A white man calls for you to break the law, march to the Capitol, and stop a constitutionally legal proceeding. Oh my God. That's the end of the world for you. Critical race theory is not being taught in school. Factual history is. Now, whether or not that factual history teaches your white child to be better in the future, or teaches your white child to be hurt by it, is up to you. It's whether you teach your child what it means to be a fair citizen in this nation, to give everybody equal rights, and that history is a lesson taught from the past, or whether or not you right now are teaching your child what bigotry is, and teaching your child how white man is supposed to be superior to all other races. It's just in the genes, you know. From what I've seen, there's absolutely nothing superior about the white man. Oh wait, I take it back. The white man, throughout history, has a superior ability to throw out bullshit and dismiss the history of other races to hide what they themselves has done in the past of history, but have no problem whatsoever in pointing out any wrongs done by any other race in history, just so long as the white man gets to look snowy white. Because if you start teaching the actual history of white people anywhere in the world, the white people are going to turn into snowflakes and just melt away because they can no longer hide the facts of their history. And they're going to make false claims about it in the attempt to get you to hide it. And they're going to make those false claims also in the ability to be able to rile up their base. They don't care if it's factual, because that's what white people do. As my ancestors used to say, methinks white men speak with forked tongue. You want to prove me wrong on that? Then stop blocking the history of black people, Native American people, Latino people, and Asian people in this country. It's not critical race theory. It's just simply history. You got a problem with history? Then maybe the thing is not to hide it. The thing is to make yourself better than what your ancestors were. Because the only thing that hiding the facts is doing is pissing off the people that you are denying their own history of. And any school that does that, that's a public school, should be deprived of any federal funding. If you can't teach factual history in your school, you do not need the funding of the federal government. Because you are not representing all the citizens of this nation. That or just stop teaching history altogether in school. Minus every single fucking book in the library that talks anything about history. Every book with the slightest hint of any kind of history. Get rid of it out of the school. Make it fair and equal. You want to take black history away from the schools, and Native American history, and Latino history, and Asian history of America in the schools out? Then let's take white history out too. We no longer teach history in schools. Because to teach any kind of history in school would be to teach critical race theory. By your standards. Maybe it'll leave more time for those active shooter drills that are needed. Because, I mean, for God's sakes, to block an insane man from coming to your kid's school by making sure he doesn't get a gun would be unspeakable. I mean, everybody in this nation, doesn't matter if they're insane, normal, they have mental problems, they've been in prison, not in prison, they've been known to be on terrorist watch groups, no matter what. By your standards, every freaking person that is a United States American citizen should be allowed to own a gun. Oh, please do give me a gun. And can you tell me when the next NRA convention is? Oh, I most certainly won't be walking into the building. But I'd like to figure out what positions would be best for when you come out of the building. Because, you know, the NRA wants guns to be carried by everybody in public. And who cares if one of those people go into a school, a shopping mall, a nightclub, a concert, a park, or wherever they choose to go and go shooting up innocent people. But for God's sakes, don't bring a gun into an NRA convention. Because we can't have that stuff there now, can we? Perfectly fine for it to happen in your child's school. But unacceptable for it to happen at an NRA convention. Totally unacceptable. Isn't it? Exactly my point of how screwed up some of you white people are. I'm not saying this racist bullshit is all white people. But these assholes who are out there talking critical race theory and it's going to make my child feel bad need to stop and think about how racist they are.